Welcome to the Terrible Podcast with your hosts from SteelersDepot.com, where you can find all your latest and greatest Steelers news. It's Dave Bryan and Alex Kozora, always lit, talking Steelers. And now, here's Dave and Alex.
Hey guys, Alex here. Quick disclaimer of today's episode. Dave and I started recording this episode of the podcast around 9 p.m. Tuesday night. We start off the show referencing some scenarios about the Patriots potentially acquiring Brandon Aiyuk that came out before Adam Schefter reported a little after 10 o'clock p.m. that the Patriots are no longer buying for Brandon Aiyuk. We do mention that late in the show. We were recording when that news broke, but it comes towards the end of the show. So just a heads up when you hear us talk about the Browns and the Patriots and the Steelers and plausibility of Aiyuk going to those three teams, that initial part was recorded before the Schefter report. So just a heads up, and now back to the show. Welcome to the Terrible Podcast, Season 15, Episode 7. He's Dave Bryan. I'm Alex Kozora, SteelersDepot.com. Thanks for being back with us here either this Tuesday night, Wednesday morning. Not entirely sure when you guys will be listening to this. Dave and I are recording Tuesday night ahead of the Wednesday training camp practice, the 12th of the summer for the Pittsburgh Steelers. But Dave, right now the focus is not on training camp. It is on Aiyuk. Brandon Aiyuk is the top story for the Steelers and for the NFL world. Where he'll end up, no one quite knows. When will it happen? No idea, but that is going to be the discussion today. So buckle up and let's get ready to dive on in.
Yeah, it's like deja vu all over again. The great Yogi Berra quote. Another great Yogi Berra quote to go along with that is, "It ain't over till it's over." Feels like both of those are appropriate. I don't know about you, but it's been a draining, exhausting last 36 hours with this Aiyuk stuff, and it's obviously a topic that we have went back and looked at the timeline since April, man. Since right before the draft with the restructuring of the Alex Highsmith contract and all like that, and obviously get into the draft and what the 49ers did, and it's still not over, and we better record this thing super quick and get it up at midnight Wednesday for fear of the dreaded terrible podcast curse where news breaks 30 minutes after we get off of it. But where would you like to start in the latest with the Aiyuk? And look, warning to listeners, we have the special edition of the podcast for training camp and all. We've been dedicating with that. We'll talk about some injuries and the health of this team in this show, but if you don't want to hear us talk about Brandon Aiyuk, it's probably going to be a good chunk of this show. So there's the disclaimer. Where would you like to start, Alex?
Fair warning. Thank you, Dave. And also, if you're listening, you may want to listen to this on 2x speed, just in case something else breaks by the time this thing comes out. We don't know where this thing's going to end up. I have an article on the site right now just trying to summarize the last 48 hours of notes and reports and the most credible things that are out there right now. As of right now, no resolution on the Brandon Aiyuk saga at 9:08 p.m. Eastern Time, Tuesday, August 6th. But there seems to be some traction towards a resolution hopefully happening sooner than later. And most likely the Brandon Aiyuk will be traded somewhere. To who? We don't know who. Pittsburgh is in the mix. They are reportedly one of the three teams most concretely in the mix. It's them, the New England Patriots, and the Cleveland Browns. So that's just the very fundamentals of where things stand right now. Aiyuk in a holding pattern, trade more likely than not, Pittsburgh in the mix.
That seems to be where we're at. And how do you want to start attacking?
I have zero idea.
Let's start with kind of the latest that came out right before we got on here from Michael Silver. And for those of you that don't know who Michael Silver is, time NFL writer, San Francisco 49ers beat writer, worked for Sports Illustrated for all those. I can remember reading Michael Silver when I was younger, in the magazine. He's got a unique personality. He's very no nonsense with dealing with people on Twitter and all like that. But when he writes a long piece, especially to the 49, with the 49ers as a subject, he's that connected that it's worth kind of, it's not kind of, it's worth paying attention to. And really to kind of summarize here, it seems like the last offer the 49ers really have made to Brandon Aiyuk, somewhere in a range of $26 million a season, has aged poorly in the ensuing 3 months. Obviously, all those wide receiver contracts have hit, and it doesn't sound like, according to his report, they've upped that offer much of anything over this time of span. It is kind of in Silver's belief that it's gotten to this point now where they're entertaining Brandon Aiyuk going out there, essentially giving him permission to talk to other teams and see if he can work out, a contract with the team. Because look, if he can't find a team to give him a contract that he wants, he's not going to that team. No team is going to invest trade compensation for a guy that they're not sure they're going to be able to sign. And that's obviously a given. Jump in. You want to jump in?
Well, I was just saying, Kyle Shanahan I believe he did confirm today that the Niners are allowing Aiyuk to explore contract terms with other teams, correct?
Right, which may obviously make sense, right?
Right.
Within that. There's nothing still to preclude the 49ers from not basically what this is okay, it's gotten to this point, Brandon. Go out there and find out what, go almost like free agency. Go find your best offer and bring it back to us, along with, tell teams to call us what they'd be willing to give us in trade compensation. And then, we'll kind of make the decision for them. Maybe you go out and find your market values higher than what we're offering you, and then maybe we're too low. Maybe we give you a contract. But it does kind of feel like it's all moved past that at this point. For it to get this far right now, it does, even though it's not impossible, as I like to say, it doesn't feel like the 49ers are going to ultimately, sign him to a deal. But, that obviously this thing's been fluid for like 36 hours at least now.
36 months. It's like, it also didn't, with Jalen Johnson at the deadline last year, kind of the last analogous thing you can try to compare this situation in Pittsburgh towards. Wasn't he given permission to talk to teams, I want to say?
Yeah, well, I'd have to rewind. It's all running together. I got mush brain right now.
Me too. Point is, there is always that chance, because Johnson at the deadline last year, the reporting was he's gone. The Chicago's trading him, and they kept him, and they obviously re-signed him. So there is still that chance that Aiyuk stays, and Shanahan said that that's an option. But obviously, if they're not going to come up in their contracts, that's really a non-starter for Aiyuk from his standpoint to at least do a long-term deal in San Francisco.
Right. And 49ers could call his bluff and say, look, we're not trading you unless we get the right compensation. And if you want to try to sit out part of the season, have at it. But obviously, too, working a little bit against Brandon Aiyuk is he would have to get back on the field in X amount of weeks to make sure his contract doesn't toll. So he's back in the same situation again,
right.
As far as that goes. So let's start from the vantage point or the analysis point of thinking that Brandon Aiyuk's going to get traded somewhere here in the very near future. As you mentioned, it sounds like the three teams in this thing right now are the Cleveland Browns, the New England Patriots, and the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, here's another, while some people have been trying to frame that the 49ers hold all the leverage in here because they're the ones that actually do say whether he stays or goes by agreeing to the trade, Brandon Aiyuk can just as easily direct his own way by saying, I don't like that team, or I don't like that contract. So even though he has there's not a no trade clause in his contract, there essentially is, because if he doesn't agree to sign a new contract with a team that might be interested in him, well, he's directing traffic of where he says he wants to go. So in essence, it is a pseudo no trade clause here, which is that's some leverage, like it or not, here when it comes to him. Now, of the three teams, let's start first with the Cleveland Browns. There's been a lot of rumbling. There's been rumblings that Amari Cooper and, I think being kind of the center point of that, and then who knows what else. Well, when you look at the Cleveland Browns financially, they are one of the top spending. They are the highest spending cash team in the NFL right now this offseason 2024. They're also the second highest on the books right now for cash spending for 2025. In other words, they've got a lot of cash committed here. Now, does that mean that they can't go out and spend more cash on a guy out like Aiyuk? No, but they would really be going, because obviously you're talking about another $28-30 million in cash, at least outlay for 2024 if they were to trade for Aiyuk and then sign him to a deal. The thing about Amari Cooper's name being circulated in this, they just restructured his contract. So there would be a lot of dead money involved. 20 something million, 22 million, something like that. A total of dead money, I think, with Amari Cooper, if they were to package him up in some sort of deal for Brandon Aiyuk. Does that mean that they can't make this trade? No, but I mean, I just want to point out that those are things that are glaring things with everything being reported about Cleveland. They would have to spend even more cash than they're already on the books to spend. And then the whole Amari Cooper, just it smells fishy when you get to including a guy like Amari Cooper in there. Not to say that they wouldn't be willing to eat the dead money, throw Amari Cooper in to get a guy like Brandon Aiyuk there. Anything else to add maybe about the Browns being in this thing, Alex?
The only thing that makes sense from Cooper is if they were to trade him, I imagine they'd have to give up a lot less in terms of trade compensation, because they're sending a number one caliber type of receiver back to San Francisco. And I imagine Cleveland is tired of going into the draft without anything, considering that's what they've done the last 2 years after trading for Deshaun Watson. So they'd be a team, I think, more inclined to trade a player and less draft capital, just because they actually want to go draft some guys next year.
Right. So could they get it done? Absolutely. It of all the teams involved here, that it feels like that's the messiest, if there is such a thing here. So that's one thing. Well, that's one team. Now the New England Patriots. Let's talk about them a little bit here. They're in I think about the middle of the road as far as cash spending this year. They obviously have the cap space to do something here. They obviously, I think, have a legitimate need at the wide receiver position. They're rebooting things after Bill Belichick and all. I really think that they are potentially in play here. And who's the wide receiver that's being talked about being
Kendrick Bourne, who spent his first 4 seasons in San Francisco under Kyle Shanahan, who might go back to San Francisco.
All right. So there's that aspect of it. And then earlier today, and we're throwing in the most credible sources that we think that we have, associated with some of these reports here. Longtime Patriots beat writer Mike Reese, who I think is one of the best, not only with the Patriots, but I think league wide. I think he really does a good job. I think he's got a lot of sources. He's covered the Patriots for a long time. He was on ESPN in a segment earlier today, and he says, a source told me that the Patriots are willing to make Aiyuk one of the top 5 highest paid wide receivers in the NFL in average per year. Okay. So with that, I mean, make him one of the top 5 highest paid wide receivers in the year. And he mentioned right along the lines with Tyreek Hill and AJ Brown. Now, Tyreek Hill is at have they updated his new money average yet? It was 30 million. I don't know with them redoing that deal if it's gone up any at all.
I think it's still 30. I think they just kind of did a cash advance, was my understanding of the Hill.
Okay, so 30 million there. AJ Brown's at 32 million per year, and the number 5, at least according to Over the Cap right now, is Jalen Waddle at 28.25. So he would at least have to jump Jalen Waddle at 28.25 million to technically be the 5th highest paid wide receiver in the year in the NFL. Mike Reese thinks they're all in on trying to get him. Okay. Now there's obviously no hard numbers being thrown around other than what Mike Reese said. And then you do have to wonder if that's the case, then what is the guaranteed money look like? Now on the flip side, a few negative things, that could be associated with Brandon Aiyuk going to New England. It's New England. I mean, someone, I forget who else put it out there. Foxborough's, where they're actually at is kind of out a ways, and obviously it's super cold there. Not that it's not cold there in Pittsburgh and all like that. But the other really, leave the geographical stuff out of it. They've got a rookie quarterback, right? And
they're not a contender.
Right. They're not technically a contender. He would be king on that team, though, when it comes to average yearly value, because especially on the offensive side of football, because I think their highest paid offensive player APY right now is that tackle of theirs. And they have the cap space. They have the cash. You got a new head coach over there. You got a rookie quarterback, however, and you're probably not going to compete at least this year. And if you're Brandon Aiyuk, you're gonna have to wonder, man, I sure hope this rookie quarterback plays out. However, if they're going to guarantee me my first 2 or 3 years of the deal, I'll deal with it, kind of thing there. So I think that's kind of where New England, I think, is at with him. And once again, Mike Reese makes it sound like they're really in this thing trying to get him. And I think he even quotes Elliott Wolf, player personnel or something other, saying, look, I mean, you need, good wide receivers on this team, yada, yada, there. But between New England and Cleveland, if I was to put the likelihood of just those two, and it would just be a guess, I would think New England. But once again, that's a guess. All right. So would you like to add anything about New England being in the mix here?
No, that sums it up. I want to get to Pittsburgh. And before we get into the nitty-gritty of kind of how it might make sense, can we go through an overview of the last, since really Monday afternoon, and kind of go step by step about Pittsburgh and the reports and rumors about them to kind of set the stage where things are at right now?
Sure. I'll save some years of my life here and let you.
Okay. All right. Well, you fill in the cracks because I've been at camp half the time, but here's the way that it's gone and the way that I've observed it and experienced it. Monday afternoon into the evening, these are just the internet people, not NFL reporters. You don't know if they're going to trust them or not, saying the deal is close, the deal is done. All that comes out. We're all on edge. Is this thing really going to happen? Are the internet people right about it or not? A little while later, NFL Network, Tom Pelissero, Mike Garafolo come out and say there is no trade in place with Pittsburgh or with anybody else. Teams are still talking. Monday night comes out. 49ers beat reporter Matt, is it Mayako? I don't know how to pronounce the last name.
Mayako, I believe. And he's a long-term beat writer as well, too, respected, right, who covers the team.
Very plugged in. He says the Patriots and Browns are clear front runners. They have frameworks of deals done with the Niners and with Aiyuk. Pittsburgh no longer an option because they would not meet the 49ers trade demands. Does not say the Steelers would not meet Aiyuk's contract demands, but would not give the compensation to San Francisco they would require to do a deal. So that's how Monday night ends. And then throughout the day on Tuesday, Ian Rappaport says the Steelers, no, they are for sure all in, or they're in on Aiyuk, and they're still in the mix for this thing. Adam Schefter, after initially being very skeptical of Pittsburgh making a play for Aiyuk, walks that back and says Pittsburgh re-engaged in trade talks with the Niners throughout the day on Tuesday, and they're still in this thing. And that's kind of basically where things are at right now in terms of, by the reporting of Rappaport and Schefter, Pittsburgh is in, along with the Patriots and the Browns.
Right. And then since then, we've had the Mike Reese report and the aforementioned Mike Silver report
right.
that we started the show with. And that's kind of where we're at. So now let's talk about the proverbial third team in the Pittsburgh Steelers. And no surprise, we've talked about that all along, that theoretically, plausibility-wise, cash-wise, cap-wise, all of it can be done technically. The compensation, obviously, look, if it's gotten this far, they've obviously had conversations with them. So the fact that they're quote unquote still in it leads you to believe that they've at least got some sort of a reputable offer out on the table that I would imagine is at least $28 million per year. And then, the only question I would have is structure. Would they be willing to guarantee more than just the 2024 money? If not, would they be willing to put a virtual guaranteed sizable roster bonus in March of 2025 in place, that worst case scenario, Aiyuk earns, let's just throw out $30 million for 2024, something horrible goes wrong and he's back on the market again because there's no guaranteed money. That's always been something that we've talked about, really, with any player, not top of the market. It until it's not a precedent, it's a precedent with the Steelers and guaranteed money beyond the first year for players that are not the top, resetting the market at their specific position. Obviously, the Steelers went guaranteed money beyond 2000, beyond the first year with TJ Watt when they signed him to his new deal, and they went guaranteed money beyond the first year with Minkah Fitzpatrick when he reset the market. The precedent that would need to be broken, and it's not like it would just have to be broken, because once again, we've talked about this team over the years. They haven't done this in X amount of years. They haven't done this. The precedent is this. All it takes is one time to break precedent. But would they be willing to break that precedent in this situation? And then the other factor that you and I have talked about consistently with this Brandon Aiyuk thing is an outsider coming in and potentially becoming the team's highest paid player under contract with the team. That would be something that would really be noteworthy of a precedent being discarded with. Okay, so it goes back to the whole plausibility thing. Can this thing happen for the Steelers? The answer is yes. What the specifics of that look like, in addition to what the compensation, and Lord knows we could have 18 different conversations about that, right?
And I want to, because I think you've laid the groundwork, because financially things haven't changed with Aiyuk for a while. The receiver market has gotten hot, but we know what Pittsburgh has to overcome to get the deal done financially, and they can. It's just a matter of, do they want to? I think the really interesting part is, in the reporting from the Niners beat guy, was that Pittsburgh was not meeting what the Niners wanted from a trade compensation standpoint. And I wonder, what would it take? What is Pittsburgh willing to give up? If we're hearing about Cooper with Cleveland, born in New England, the Niners appear they want a player back in return to give them some asset to help them win this year, if they're going to part with a major asset in Aiyuk as a team that is, almost won the Super Bowl the last 2 years. So what could Pittsburgh give to get that deal done from that side. To me, I think it's the more interesting element of the Aiyuk deal at this point.
Right. I would like to think that, and this is dangerous, I would like to think that Omar Khan would like to get out of this thing without unleashing a number one, if at all possible.
Sure. I think that's fair to assume that's what Khan wants. Is that going to be what it takes is the question.
I don't know the answer to that. I would just like to think that he's going into this with everything under his power and ability to possibly not go that route. Now, if that's what it takes to get it done, well, that's what it takes to get it done, right?
And if you can't give up a veteran, you're going to have to give up more in picks. Again, I think Cleveland could give away less in draft capital if they're giving away a much larger asset and player in Amari Cooper. And while Kendrick Bourne is not Amari Cooper, you might be able to work the deal and give up less draft capital if you're New England because you're throwing in the player. And so if Pittsburgh can't throw in a player, that means they're going to obviously have to give up more in draft capital.
Potentially, unless the only sidestep to that is if Brandon Aiyuk and look, there's been reports out there today saying, his favorite is the Steelers of these three teams, where he, if he had his druthers and would rank him, probably be the Steelers number one. Which, I mean, and why wouldn't it be? I mean, he seems to like Mike Tomlin, obviously, commenting on his Instagram and all like that. I do believe the fact that if left to his own picking, and if all things were equal, he'd pick the Steelers. Okay.
Agreed.
But all right, now, all right, what player or player do you think you could reasonably part with? Throw some players in there that you think the Steelers might be asked theoretically, and man, we're getting into a real dangerous part here. Theoretically be asked to part with.
I mean, in terms of if the Niners want a receiver back, I don't know what receiver Pittsburgh could give up that would help move the needle on a deal. It's not going to be, Quez Watkins to get this deal done.
No.
I mean, you can give up a Calvin Austin and that's fine, but that's such a small piece in terms of what the Niners would want back in compensation. Would the Niners want back Pickens? If you're Pittsburgh, how could you part with George Pickens?
Well, here's the thing. If you parted with Pickens, wouldn't you be back in the same boat that you're in of needing two receivers?
Sure, exactly. I mean, you could argue that, well, you have more faith in Aiyuk as a person and not worried about Pickens, being an issue that he's been from time to time. That you could argue that, but I think it's a pretty weak argument to make.
Sure, and you could also argue at least he's got 2 years left on his deal, this year and technically next year, even though he'll be wanting to get paid. And would the 49ers even look at him and say, man, we're going to be in the same boat next year with George Pickens wanting to break the market,
Well, then at that point, you may trade Debo. I don't know, but that's 10 steps down the road.
Right.
I mean, in terms of what else you could give up, I know people have, again, Alex Highsmith not getting dealt financially, all the dead money just would be insane to do. You could, if you wanted to put in Dan Moore, Darnell Washington, fine. But those aren't moving the needle on contracts. What are the Niners going to do with Dan Moore Jr.? Yeah, I know Trent Williams is holding out right now, but they're going to go, don't worry, Trent, stay at home. We got Dan Moore Jr. We got this. Like, it's not moving the needle. You could throw that as an add-on, fine, but that's not even close to the centerpiece of a deal. I'm just going to put it out there. And again, we're not writing about it much, but Pony saying James Daniels is potentially an option they could part with. And that would make some level of sense. Expiring contract, Pittsburgh not showing an appetite to re-sign him. Niners could use some interior lineman help. I'm not saying they should do that. I'm just saying that is a name that at least would move the needle on the framework of a deal.
Okay, let's suppose that they did ask for James Daniels back in return. Okay. He's in the final year of his current contract, however. So if you're the I'm going to play John Lynch. Okay. All right. Well, if you're willing, if you're up to it and willing to throw in James Daniels, we would like permission to talk to him because we would like to potentially work out a contract extension with him because we don't want to trade for a player and then be unable to sign him. And then he walks off after a 1-year rental.
Sure, I think that's reasonable considering that's what Pittsburgh would be doing with Aiyuk.
All right, and as far as then aren't you sort of creating James Daniels with a little leverage then at this point to say, all right, well, I just saw what the guard market did. This is my opportunity. I'm still young. I can strike it now. Yeah, I'll talk to the 49ers, but this is the if you want me, this is the deal that I want to make, and it's going to be top 5, top 6, top 7 guard money.
Sure, I agree. But the Niners should know that going in. If they were to hypothetically be targeting him, they know what the guard market looks like and what
right.
a decent offer would have to be to make a deal happen.
Right. But then aren't you kind of in the same boat, though, of having to negotiate a contract with a player, albeit another position?
Yeah, I think it's cheaper. It's a different position. It may be easier to get this done. Clearly, Aiyuk and the Niners are at an impasse in terms of the value of what each side perceives, Aiyuk to be. Daniels may not have that issue.
All right, let me play devil's advocate one more time with James Daniels. If you're the 49ers, I'm going to put you in John Lynch's chair. Mm-hmm. Would you trade for James as part of all this? Would you accept James Daniels as part of the compensation without a new contract in place?
Ideally, no, or at the least, you would want to have some contract talks to get a good ballpark figure. Maybe the deal doesn't have to be completely fleshed out. I mean, we have seen teams do that before. The Bears traded for Montez Sweat last year. It didn't have a deal initially in place. The Jets just traded for Hassan Reddick, which is kind of backfiring on them, but that's the same principle. You may not need to have every I dotted and T crossed, but you probably need to have an idea of what he's looking for, big picture, before proceeding on a deal.
Right. I agree. But I tell you, I would really like to try to have that thing sewn up before trading for him.
Of course,
if I'm
ideally.
The 49ers.
And what would that be? Daniels? It wouldn't just be a player for player swap. You give up a third in Daniels. I mean, we're just kind of guessing, but a second in Daniels, I don't know what the add-on would be to get a deal done.
Yeah, it's dangerous there. Something like that. Let me leave it at that.
Let me put on the Omar Khan hat for the trade, and Aiyuk is the better player of the two. But let's just say, hypothetically, you're trading James Daniels. Okay, who's your starting right guard in 1 month from now?
Good point. Do you go with Nate Herbig, a guy that's obviously played some at that position, more so than he has at center in the NFL, and then by default, you're naming Zach Frazier your starting center, which isn't the worst thing in the world. He's going to get positioned sooner or later, but what is the fall off from James Daniels to Nate Herbig would be the first question you have to answer. And then second, how comfortable are you with Mason McCormick, a rookie? You would essentially set yourself up for potentially having 3 rookies play a considerable amount of snaps in 2024. And look, a lot of people are hoping 2 of them already do, and Troy Fautano and Zach Frazier. So that at its core, 2/3 is not a big deal. But how big a drop off, if any, do you think you could have by going from Daniels to either Nate Herbig or Mason McCormick? And then also, are you comfortable enough with the depth behind you? Because I would imagine Spencer Anderson comes into play as a backup on the roster if you jettison Daniels at that point.
Well, what if he started? I mean, he's running second team right guard throughout camp most of the time right now, and he's gotten the first team reps, the majority of them, when Sayamalu has gotten time off.
Okay. All right. That's plausible as well, too.
So, yeah, I mean, it's all fair questions. And again, to answer it or to not answer it, I don't know who would start. I think the Herbig idea is interesting. Would you shift Herbig over to his more natural spot, although he's had a really strong summer at center? But then, you have Frazier, who we all thought coming into camp was going to be your week 1 starter. So there are obviously solutions to that. It's just a question of whether or not you would want to do that. But, from Pittsburgh's standpoint, they know they're not re-signing Daniels after this year. So This is, one and done for him because the guard market has gotten so hot. So, I mean, I could see that the appetite there from Pittsburgh's standpoint. Now, we're going to lose this guy. If we can go trade a pending free agent for Aiyuk, who we can lock up long-term and the better player on top of other compensation, that's when a deal could start to come together.
Right, because if you're assuming you're going to lose James Daniels next year in free agency anyway, even the compensate, let's say you got full bore on 1-for-1 compensatory draft pick value by his contract alone because of the offset of whatever else happens. Even so, you're waiting until 2026 for that pick.
Right. It probably would be a third round compensatory pick or value that hopefully becomes a pick, but you're still waiting a while to actually get that, to be able to utilize that selection.
All right, so let's leave the conversation in lieu of going further down that. I think we hashed that out pretty good, and I think we could leave it with Jay. We'll turn this into a Mythbusters episode.
Are you Jamie or Adam? Which one are you?
Which one has more hair?
Well, one has the bigger beard.
Yeah,
I'm losing track of which one is which, but I think you're Adam. I think I'm Jamie. Or no, I'm Adam. You're Jamie.
Okay, all right. Plausible with a big stamp on it.
Yeah.
So I think if you want to entertain the thought of James Daniels possibly maybe being involved in this, I think you can at least come away. I think we just hashed it out enough to say that that's a plausible player, him and something else, a pick of some sorts.
I think the most interesting element of all of this, and there's so much to wade through, is what you touched on earlier, is Pittsburgh trying to wait out San Francisco with the belief that Aiyuk only wants to come to Pittsburgh and that eventually San Francisco will cave and say, yes, New England, Cleveland could give us more, but Aiyuk doesn't want to go. The deal can't happen. Pittsburgh is the only move left to make, and we don't want to go into the season with an unhappy Aiyuk, and who knows where that leads. So let's just trade him for 75 cents on the dollar, wrap up this saga, get what we can get, and move ahead. I think that's what Pittsburgh's calculation with Omar Khan is thinking. Let's wait this thing out, make the Niners sweat, and hope they cave.
I could go along with that, and I think I've tweeted and said as much along the line here. In other words, the conversations are short and sweet, and basically playing liar's poker here. There's my cards. Don't call me unless you're ready to call this thing in.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, but that makes a lot of sense.
This is my best offer. Here it is. There's no sense haggling. We've got everything worked out with Brandon Aiyuk. And deep down inside, if you're Omar Khan, you're thinking, man, we know he really wants to get here. And if he doesn't agree to any place, if he says you have to trade me to the Pittsburgh Steelers or don't trade me at all, well, then they're going to have to eventually get to a point where they're going to have to take the best deal. And if Omar doesn't get emotionally involved with the fact of John Lynch calling him every 15 minutes, like these beat writers post on Twitter and saying, we got, the 49ers are over here. They're, they're doing this. And obviously the agent, what is the agent going to do on all that? He wants to get his guy the most money possible and the most guaranteed money. So maybe even the agent's probably stoking things.
Sure.
A little bit, even trying to needle Pittsburgh a little bit more, saying, hey, the Patriots over here doing this, you want to come up more on this guaranteed money, or Pat, you see where I'm going on it. You just have to, and I believe, I like to think that I believe Omar and them have set a ceiling that, look, this is as far as we're willing to go. And if it's one nickel more or one, round more or whatever, then we're just not going to do it. This is our plan. If it comes together, fine. If it doesn't, fine.
I agree. And that agent, they could stoke the Omar Khan in that fire, but they could also go to San Francisco and say, hey, Pittsburgh's giving us a good offer. Like, let's do this deal. Pittsburgh has an offer we want. You guys need to trade Aiyuk right now. Get what you can get. Let's wrap this thing up.
Right. And Lynch can sit there on the phone waiting as long as possible, thinking that, but it still wouldn't matter with other teams calling him if Brandon and his agents or agent have the final say of where he goes and what he goes. Now, look, would it be if you had a team out there like the Patriots that are willing to pay you $30 million and guarantee you the first 2 full years of the deal, that it would be hard for him to turn it down.
Sure, it would.
And then, of course, the Patriots compensation, whatever that looked like, would have to come into play and all.
Right. But I mean, I just think the Niners are under more pressure to deal him than any team is to acquire him right now. Pittsburgh's not feeling the heat, even though, of course, I think so many fans want an answer and want him to be traded to Pittsburgh, whatever the case is. The Niners feel the heat that we got to make a decision here. Pittsburgh can kind of sit back and, apply some pressure, but the Niners are the one, I think, feeling the most amount of pressure here, which might create the most motivation to make a move and potentially fold and make a deal with Pittsburgh.
Let me ask you this. If Pittsburgh gets the deal done for him, will it include a first-round draft pick?
I mean, I wish I had that answer. My gut right now is saying no, it won't. But I really don't know. I mean, the question is just even more simply, what are the odds he comes to Pittsburgh as we sit here now at 9:45 Tuesday night, August 6th?
I have got myself caught up in this thing to the point where in the last 36 hours, both the fan side of me and the analyst side of me was convinced that this was going to happen this evening for the Steelers.
Mm-hmm.
And then I sat on that feeling long enough for that Mike Reese report to come out.
For some new information to come in.
Him saying that, man, the Patriots really want him and top 5 wide receiver money. And my biggest question really boils back to the kind of the questions I've had throughout this whole thing with him is I wonder if the Steelers are willing to guarantee more money past 2024. Because it sounds like they're probably where they need to be APY wise. It's just, are they there with the guaranteed money aspect of it all? Whereas maybe Aiyuk can get better than that from a team such as the Patriots. As far as chances go, look, it's more than 50%
for Pittsburgh.
For Pittsburgh, whatever number you want to put on it, it feels like it's definitely more than 50%.
Okay. I wasn't sure where you were going to go. I didn't know if you were going to say, I'm starting to sour on the idea.
I was close to like 99.95% earlier today. I just got this overwhelming sense once Schefter flipped and just over analyzing this thing the last 36 hours. I mean, I was to that 99.95% chance thinking, man, this is going to go in the Steelers' favor tonight.
How close are you to that 99.95% right now? You're above 50, but how close are you to nearly 100 like you were?
I still would give it more than a 75% chance, I think, at this point now. But okay. I do.
That's a high number.
Yeah, I do wonder. And it's only because I trust Mike Reese's reporting so much. And I'm putting, and people say, how can you do that? These guys get it wrong all the time. Yeah, you're exactly right. That's why the longer you do this and the longer you listeners follow and the longer you read and whatnot, you're going to get these guys that you trust more than these other guys reporting there. But Mike Reese is so connected to that team,
But all he's saying is that they're willing to pay him top 5 money. We don't know if Pittsburgh's willing to do the same. Exactly. We don't know if Aiyuk wants to come to Pitt or wants to go to New England for that or anything.
Exactly. And look, I mean, if you look at the top 5 money like we just did there, I mean, if you're only talking about topping 28.25, I mean, that's just a hair more than 28. I wrote out what I thought a triple crown win for the Steelers would be in acquiring Obviously, people saying, I don't care how you frame this thing. As long as they get Aiyuk, it's a win for the Steelers. Agreed. Okay. But here is my hypothetical ideal Triple Crown winning scenario.
Put that on a bumper sticker.
Yeah. What is this? The Stone Cold Lead Pipe Lock of the century of the week of the month.
Yeah.
Here is what I deem the ideal Triple Crown winning scenario for the Steelers should they land Brandon Aiyuk. It would encompass these three outcomes: not give up a first round pick. I think you'd be on board with that, right?
Sure, that'd be huge.
All right. New money APY comes in just under TJ Watt at 28 million even. So in other words, he would not be technically the highest paid player under contract. TJ Watt would still have that title by just a tiny bit.
And what's Watt at? What is his number?
28 points. Hold on. It's so minuscule, but it's still.
Oh, it matters. Yeah, because like St. Brown got like. Well, anyway, it doesn't matter. But
28.002750.
And I'm sure he got that number because he was trying to top whoever was at 28 whenever Watt got his deal done, right? So these things matter.
Right. So it would if it's 28 million, he would technically be the sixth highest paid receiver, I guess, in the league if it was exactly 28 million. So that would be number two, right?
Okay.
Okay. You could get on board with that being a huge win, right?
Sure, absolutely. Below 30 is a win.
All right. Number three. No new fully guaranteed money past 2024.
Yeah, Pittsburgh continues their structure and won't break precedent, and that's important for them. That's also a win.
That's what I would get. Now, look, do they have to hit all three of those benchmarks to make this deal? And in the eyes of some fans, it not be a perfect deal. No, I'm just talking. If you want to talk about typical Pittsburgh Steelers Omar Khan heist of the century, that's what it would look like in my eyes. And even though people listening say, well, I could see them doing this, but not that, no way they do all three. I think technically, and especially if Aiyuk wants to come to Pittsburgh that bad, I think all three are potentially plausible, at least.
I do too. I mean, those aren't pie in the sky ideas of get him for a fourth round pick. No, I mean, these are all realistic. So if you do a second round pick and a player and maybe something else pick wise, and you get him for 28 million under the structure that's common for Pittsburgh for non-true top of the market names, then those things are all realistic. To give my answer on where I'm at on the likelihood of an Aiyuk deal to Pittsburgh, I don't have a number. I'm not going to put a number on it. I will say, though, I am optimistic that it's going to happen. And I'm going to try to cut through all the noise, as much noise as to raise, and boil it down to this. Pittsburgh wants another outside receiver. They think it's a missing piece for this offense. They've been searching for somebody. They've been pursuing Aiyuk for quite some time. Aiyuk, likely of the three teams, would most want to come to Pittsburgh. That's been the reporting, and that just makes sense based on his connections with the Steelers and the way he's talked about Pittsburgh and
the whole Ryan Clark interview, everything.
Right. So Pittsburgh wants a receiver. Aiyuk wants to come to Pittsburgh. There's your framework. You can figure everything else out, but if you have those two elements of it, you can make a deal work. That's where I come in at. Why I am optimistic.
All right, now what if? Now that we tell people we don't deal in hypotheticals. All right, what if Omar just sent us a quick email right this moment and says, "I'm not going to say anything, but I'm going to tell you that we're willing to guarantee money beyond the first year of the contract with Brandon Aiyuk, and that's all you get from me." Where would your percentage of things going down in Pittsburgh's favor be at then? Just knowing that one little sliver of information,
but not knowing the APY,
not knowing the APY, not knowing compensation, not knowing anything else. If we got a note from Omar, so I'm going to give you this one thing one time. Mm-hmm. We're willing to guarantee money outside of the first year with Brandon Aiyuk. It's tricky, ain't it?
It's an important part for sure. But what it sounds like, and we're all, again, just to repeat, we're all guessing. It sounds like the bigger issue is not about the contract with Aiyuk in Pittsburgh as it is the trade compensation with San Francisco. So I still think that's maybe the bigger obstacle to overcome currently, which either can be done by Omar and the Steelers raising their price or waiting out San Francisco in the hopes that they lower their price, realizing that maybe Pittsburgh is the only option they can actually move Aiyuk to.
I will tell you, I'm gonna take the other side of that there and telling you that if I was afforded that piece of information, I would be back up to 99.5% thinking this thing goes down for the sheer fact that Aiyuk knows that he's getting guaranteed money beyond the first year. And I would imagine the APY fits what he wants at that point. And at that point, he could say, send me to Pittsburgh or send me nowhere.
So you're reaching it from the same place I am, but just in the other direction, I guess, of like the same conclusion of it may come down to Aiyuk just forcing the Niners' hand,
right?
But in a different way,
right?
Okay, I see. So but bottom line is we're both sounding pretty optimistic about this happening. And is there a guarantee? No. The Patriots could offer more money. They probably are capable to do that. They're probably willing to pay whatever it costs financially to make this move. They need a number one receiver. They need some weapons. They need some talent for an offense that, is in an AFC East with some firepower with Buffalo and Miami, a team that's trying to restart and have some anchors to build around. So there's that. And who knows? Could some team come in out of nowhere and scoop up Aiyuk? Could Washington jump back in? Not looking likely. But you never know. Calvin Ridley with Tennessee, that happened last second. I think the reporting was like New England and Jacksonville were the two teams trying to get Ridley, and then all of a sudden he's off to Tennessee. So we never know exactly how these things go. But again, I just try to keep it super simple. Pittsburgh wants a receiver. Aiyuk wants Pittsburgh. There you go.
And then let's not totally dismiss the fact, whatever his best offer is, if he went back to San Francisco, there's an outside chance that they could say, okay. It doesn't feel likely, but the fourth team in this is the team he's on.
Sure, him staying in San Francisco, and there's nothing that prevents them from waking up tomorrow and saying, all right, Brandon, you win. Here's 28.5, the structure you want. Sign it. Let's end this thing today. They may say the offers aren't good enough. I mean, from San Francisco standpoint, if Aiyuk says, I want to go to Pittsburgh and the offers aren't good enough, do the Niners say it's better for us to pay a couple extra million more for Aiyuk and not trade him for below our standard of compensation? That's a realistic, I think, thought for the Niners to have.
Right. I agree.
Because if you're the Niners, would you rather trade him for pennies on the dollar or pay $1.5 million more per year to keep him to win a Super Bowl?
Man, what did Shanahan say today?
He didn't say a whole lot. He just said it would suck to lose a player.
Yeah, it would suck to lose a great player like Brandon Aiyuk.
Right. So if you're the Niners, if I'm a Niners fan, I'm saying, guys, just pay Aiyuk the money. Right. What are we talking about here? Just keep this guy. Like we went to the NFC title game 2 years ago with a rookie quarterback who we lost our quarterbacks in that game. Probably would have beat the Eagles had we not been playing Christian McCaffrey at quarterback. We lost the Super Bowl in overtime. Nearly double overtime to the Chiefs last year. We are so darn close at this thing. Do not move backwards.
Right.
So
can you imagine if the Steelers get out of this without a player and without a first round pick, what their fan base is going to do to them?
Yeah, I mean they're going to get crushed for it in the media. So if I'm a Niners fan, I'm saying just pay the guy an extra. Like why? What is the issue with San Francisco being unwilling to pay Aiyuk a little bit more, knowing how hot this market has gotten? It's not an unreasonable number for Aiyuk to ask for 28 plus right now. And
shame on them for and part of Silver's article this afternoon was, man, why didn't you get it? Why didn't you either deal him at the draft and get the picks for him or get a deal done before this whole market started going crazy this offseason?
I do not understand why teams don't get deals done with players earlier unless the case is the player is intentionally waiting because they know the market's going to get hot and it's going to go up a la Dak Prescott. But if I ever have a player that I want to keep who comes to me and says, I want to get paid in March or April, like I'm doing that immediately because I know the next guy's going to get paid and the market's going to go up. And you had the foresight to see all the receivers who probably were going to get deals this offseason, Justin Jefferson, et cetera. So I think it's a colossal mistake on the Niners' part. I think they bungled this whole situation.
And they're going to, these guys, Grant Cohn is he's constantly on Twitter needling the organization. And all, we had him on the podcast first week last year, right? Quite the character. He's not afraid to speak his mind, what he feels the organization is doing right and wrong in his eyes. And then Michael Silver is just going to absolutely tear him to shreds. He partially did in today's in his article today, and he's really going to unleash on them. And if any team is able to get out of this without a player and without a first round pick to get Brandon Aiyuk, they're going to get absolutely shredded. And I don't know. And you obviously saw the news today about the first Rick what's his
Ricky
name?
Pearsall.
Yeah, Pearsall re-injured his shoulder again this afternoon.
Yeah. So what do you do with that? Do you feel more compelled to keep Aiyuk, unsure about Pearsall's status? You still have weapons. You got Kittle, you have Jennings, you have Debo, you have McCaffrey, you draft Jacob Cowing. There is still talent, but of course trading Aiyuk is a massive blow to the offense, especially in the short term. And
this isn't our concern or listeners' concern or fans of the Steelers' concern or whatever. But what does this do to guys on your team right now? Because you got all these players right now having to answer questions. McCaffrey kind of slipped up. I don't know if it's just a Freudian slip or him just these guys are constantly having to answer questions about this right now, with this being forefront, and they're trying to get ready for the season. They don't even, they don't know for sure whether or not they're going to have a big piece of that Brandon Aiyuk on a team. And what does that say? Where does their faith in the organization go moving forward?
Sure. And if you didn't know, McCaffrey referred to Aiyuk as a former teammate in an interview earlier today before correcting himself and saying teammate. So that's the slip up that made the waves on Twitter. But yeah, that's a fair point as well. The team doesn't know what they have, and they're trying to get focused and ready on week one with a lot of pressure on this team, and they'd love to know an answer.
Would you deal first round if it came down to it to get the deal done on the Steelers side? And would you include the first round pick?
I would. We've had this conversation before. I'll be consistent. Now, how much on top of that am I willing to give? I'm not giving James Daniels and a first round pick. I'm not trading both of those pieces. I'm probably giving a first and something else, a first and maybe a mid round pick, or maybe some sort of player. If they want Calvin Austin, have at it. But I'm willing to do that because this team needs to win. They need to win. They need to complete this offense. This offense has been too crappy for too long. The pressure to win a playoff game, this playoff drought is unacceptable. They got to make a move. They got to be aggressive. The team feels it. Work for it. You got to make these moves.
And also, there's still a level of uncertainty of what's going to happen with George Pickens past this year, regardless. And Aiyuk fits everything that you do. He's a good young player. He's got a lot of mileage left on him. He fits. So yeah, I'm with you. If push came to shove and it ends up being a first round pick, if that's what it took, then yeah, I think you got to do it.
Right. So that's all I really have to say. We'll wait. There'll be 1,000 more reports coming out probably before this thing is wrapped up.
I just hope we get this thing posted on the internet before anything.
Honestly.
I mean, it's literally been like every 20 minutes for most of the last 2 days during the heat of the days. This thing's got to come to a head soon, right?
You think? I mean, how much longer can it drag on for?
I mean, the teams that are in are got to be in at this point, right? And everybody's has had to have had those conversations, those hard conversations by now, I would think.
I don't know. I really don't know. I mean, the Niners, they can still wait if they want to. They still hold that leverage in the sense of we trade the player when we decide to trade the player. And if they want to wait until the last second, I mean, if you're trading Aiyuk, would you want to wait until the last second and just make the team that's acquiring him either give their best offer or have to deal with integrating Aiyuk on the fly?
I think the longer you wait, assuming Brandon's not already pointing at the Steelers and saying that's where I want to go, I think you run more of a risk of him decreasing your compensation, whatever that might be on your best compensation right now, the longer that you do wait.
That's fair. I mean, it's a different circumstance. It's not a trade scenario, but they waited until the very last second to do the deal with Nick Bosa last year. It was like, 3 days before the Steelers game where they finally got that thing done. So in some respect, they've shown a willingness to wait until the clock strikes midnight to finalize something.
Look, and then rolling, I guess we can kind of wrap it up this way. Of all dating all the way back toward, when we've been talking about this since March, April. Of all the long period that we've been talking about this is the most optimistic I've been at my core. And look, I wrote that. When did I write that post? The plausibility of the Steelers trading for Aiyuk, and then saying essentially, it's very plausible. Research when I wrote that article.
Okay. Was that around the draft? I'm as optimistic as I was since the draft.
Here it is. Examining plausibility of Steelers trading for 49ers wide receiver Brandon Aiyuk. I wrote that on March 19th.
And what was your conclusion on that?
I said, so will this trade ultimately happen? I obviously don't know for sure. That said, I can't sit here today and tell you that it definitely won't. It is plausible and doable on the Steelers' end, but it would require them to break a few historical trends in the process. For now, we will wait and see what happens.
Are you more optimistic now or back then around March and draft time when they restructured the Highsmith contract and felt like, okay, they might be making some moves to make some moves?
At that same time, though, we were talking about what's going to happen with T. Higgins, what's going to happen with DK, what's going to happen with Sutton in Denver, what's going to happen with DK Metcalf. I think there were obviously several free agents were still on the market at the time. You remember
the draft itself, would they just draft a receiver?
Right. And I wrote this on March 19th. So, I've accepted the plausibility of this thing being able to happen. But if you're asking me of where my
likelihood, I'm asking likelihood.
I'm feeling at this point right now, feeling a lot more likely it could happen than I did on March 19th.
What about compared to the draft? Whenever they restructured the Highsmith contract, are you feeling more optimistic about a deal getting done now, or were you more optimistic at that point in time?
Here's the main thing about here was the thing about the Highsmith thing. It lets you know that the Steelers were interested in something because they had enough cap space at the time to do the rest of their offseason work. Even though my thought going into the offseason was they were going to restructure Highsmith, but it wasn't going to be until July, August, or right up till the start of the regular season. I knew that they were likely to restructure. The moment they signed Alex Highsmith to the deal, it was pretty evident that he was going to be the first in line to be restructured, for it to happen this year. I just didn't think it was going to happen ahead of the draft that early. And when they did that, that was a huge flag that this team is interested in some sort of acquiring a big salary to get it up underneath the cap, whatever position it was, which obviously even back then we were thinking wide receiver,
Right.
But was I thinking Aiyuk specifically at the time? No. But he was in a group that we were having the conversations about because obviously I wrote that article on March 19th about Aiyuk.
You had the Netflix series in mind, receiver, just any receiver, any name receiver could fit that bill. Okay, I got you.
But I wasn't sitting here at the time that I wrote that post in March thinking, oh boy, this is 82%. I was opening up the fact that, hey, and Uncle Dave's the one that's constantly poo-pooing on these ideas, right? I want to let people know that, from a financial standpoint, from all aspects, from where the Steelers were concerned, this seems plausible. Now, I if you had asked me at the time, okay, Dave, the Steelers definitely trade for Aiyuk. When does that happen? I would have thought it would have happened well before August 6th.
I thought it would happen before the draft because that's when the Niners could have gone in and gotten a receiver and a receiver-heavy class and replenished and replaced Aiyuk right then and there without having to do this dance of how do we make a deal happen in August and try to get some players back and try to help us win now and the complications that come along with it.
Now, look, how many different flame-ups have we had around this Aiyuk thing since March?
Too many to count.
At least 4?
I'm not even going to try to go back and think and count, but
I think the last, and I don't want to say legitimate because what makes for a legitimate flare up if the player doesn't get traded? I think that last round of the Aiyuk flare up when everybody said, "Oh, it's potentially going to happen," combined with the Cortland Sutton getting a little bit extra money, and then DK Metcalf looking like he's going to stay put and all like that. I did lose a considerable amount of hope that one of those big names would be coming to Pittsburgh at that point.
And I lost hope on Aiyuk kind of post-draft because I thought, it's going to be too much money, and the Niners don't have a lot of reason to do a trade, and they're probably going to work out a long-term deal at some point. It just seemed like that had gone away. But now
I thought Aiyuk was going to do his dog and pony and not show up, go through the OTA process, maybe even get to training camp and start a hold in, and then a deal get done with the 49ers.
Because they went down that road with Debo, where Debo asked for a trade. That was earlier, but he asked for a trade, and they get a deal done. And I thought the same story would play out in San Francisco again with Aiyuk. Yeah,
look, to sum it up, I have not been this optimistic about them getting a deal done for Aiyuk until now. I mean, this is the most optimistic I've been about this, even dating all the way back to March 19th.
Let me ask you one last question, and I'm going to put you on the spot here because this may be the last opportunity I have to ask the question before something becomes official. It may not, but I'm going to assume that it is right now. Dave, I'm telling you, Brandon and I, this is me, hypothetical. I should preface this, not a Kenny Pickett 2.0 thing. Hypothetically, Brandon
Use a different voice.
Oh, God, you don't want that. Hypothetically, Brandon Aiyuk has been traded to the Pittsburgh Steelers. What have the Steelers given back the Niners?
Oh,
do we mean to answer first? I have just my guess.
I hate these because it's so hard, and you pin yourself into specific, absolute specifics that are almost like a mock draft.
We're just guessing.
Go ahead.
The Steelers return to the Niners offensive guard James Daniels in a second-round pick in 2025. And maybe some sort of pick swap, but that might be tough to do with two talented teams and two potential contending teams. But Daniels, a second-round pick next year.
I'll go no players, a second and a fourth.
Oh, I hope yours comes true.
Omar likes people over the barrel, man.
Oh, hold on. Adam Schefter, this is not Steelers, but the Patriots are apparently pulling out of the Brandon Aiyuk sweepstakes, according to Adam Schefter. After inquiring about Brandon Aiyuk's availability, the Patriots have decided not to explore any further trade possibilities with the 49ers regarding their standout wide receiver. Patriots are excited about their young receivers and want to focus on them. That part is last part's BS, but whatever the reason is, according to Schefter, the Patriots are out. Now, could they come back in? Possibly, but that is Adam Schefter reporting that.
Wow.
So if there were 3, now there are 2.
Wow.
It's the part where we get quiet again. We had a little mini Kenny Pickett after I just said not Kenny Pickett, a little bit like that.
Wow.
So are you more optimistic now,
Oh,
Dave?
yeah. And look, I mean, that's even more reason to think Omar's got him over the barrel now.
Absolutely. So that is the latest. And we're getting it for the site. Okay, we're getting that written up. So that would leave the 2 AFC North teams, the Cleveland Browns and the Steelers. And yeah, you thought the Patriots, which I know made sense because financially they probably could have handled it the best from a money standpoint, and now they're out. And now it might come down to, would the Browns give Cooper? Aiyuk wants to come to Pittsburgh. We dance.
Wow. And look, I mean, this very well could end up being a huge heist here.
Yeah, I mean, if the only option left is Pittsburgh, or as we said, the Niners cave contractually and say Aiyuk will pay you what you want. We'd rather pay you the little extra that we weren't willing to go than to trade you for a little less than what we were willing to take.
Wow,
which I think makes more sense.
I was afraid this was going to happen because now people are going to listen to the front end of this show. But
we may want to put a disclaimer. Actually, may want to re-record and put a disclaimer and say that some news came through while we were recording the show here. Okay. All right, so I'm as optimistic as I was before that news. I was as optimistic as I was pre-draft when the Highsmith restructure took place. They were going to make a move. I'm now more optimistic than ever that Brandon Aiyuk will become a Pittsburgh Steeler. And
I'm more optimistic that they might not have to give up as much now. What if, man, I'm speechless. We're back to Kenny Pickett part 2 here.
A little bit.
Look, I thought the Patriots, going by Mike Reese's report, I thought they were in this thing.
Yeah, it sounded like it, but they're apparently out. I don't know exactly what the issue was. If they were willing to give the money, were they not, and they were willing to do the compensation, then why did they all of a sudden do an about face? I don't know what the change of heart was with them, but regardless, it seems like they're out. Now, again, teams could jump back in.
Right.
The Steelers were out as of this time 24 hours ago, and then they're back in. Mm-hmm. But Adam Schefter, even though he did his flip-flop on Pittsburgh earlier, he's, if he says it, you're pretty confident that's going to be the case.
All right. Do we want to, can we say, when are we doing the next, in other words, can we end the show now? We've gone an hour, I think, or do you want to talk depth chart any?
It's hard to pivot to that. Just really quickly, depth chart. It's a depth chart. There really is not anything super interesting or really any takeaways. They only do it because they have to. There really is not much. Connor Hayward, a fullback. It's really not a take. Bishop. It's slot corner, but he's been running first team slot corner. It's really just, they could have put somebody else there, but no one would have believed it. So the depth chart is really not much to discuss.
All right. Shall we end this then and get this thing up?
Yeah, let's get this thing posted before 47 more Aiyuk storylines come out. So stay tuned, folks. Stay tuned.
All right. As always, you can follow me on Twitter /X at Steelers Depot. Follow Alex at Alex_Kozora. Follow the show at Terrible Podcast. Email the show, theterriblepodcast@gmail.com. Like what we do and want to donate to the cause, SteelersDepot.com. Hit the donate button. Also, if you like an ad-free version of the site, SteelersDepot.com. Hit the ad-free button up right navigational bar. Follow the directions that way. Alex and I will be recapping the Wednesday training camp practice Wednesday night. And obviously Friday show, maybe we're talking about Brandon Aiyuk being a Pittsburgh Steeler at that point. So until then, as always, thanks for listening to the Terrible Podcast with Dave and Alex.